At my son's wedding, his bride told me there was no seat for me. She said to me, "Ma'am, I'm sorry there's no seat for you." That's what my son's bride told me, standing there with her bouquet still fresh and her smile painted on like Sunday lipstick. I heard every word clear as a bell, like the ushers had turned life into a loudspeaker. I was holding my little clutch with both hands, the one Sister Denise loaned me, and I said, soft as I could, "Baby, you must mean there's a mix-up. I can wait while y'all fix it." She looked me right in my eyes.
"No, ma'am.
There isn't one." I felt something in me sit down before my body did. All those tables shining under the lights. Champagne catching the glow like small stars. And me, his mama, sent to the back like a stranger. They put a metal chair near the swinging kitchen door. The servers kept brushing past with plates. Every time the door swung open, I smelled garlic and heat and somebody else's celebration. I set my clutch in my lap and tried to fold my hands in a way that didn't show the shaking. Please take a second to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. So the band started up. Laughter rose and fell like a wave I wasn't allowed to ride. My son, my Daniel, was across the hall shaking hands, nodding, looking like a man who had finally walked into a life he once dreamed out loud with me over beans and rice. Folks clapped him on the back. Her friends took pictures with her, turning toward the light, turning away from me. When they called for the parents to take photographs, I lifted my hand, just enough not to make a fuss, only to say, "I'm here." She caught his elbow and tugged him toward the camera. I saw her mouth the words, and I watched my boy nod. He didn't look for me. He didn't look at me. He looked at the lens and gave it his smile, and the lens took it from him like it had a right to. I told myself not to cry. I told myself to sit up straight. I told myself if I could work 2 shifts at the diner and a night at the motel laundry and still find a hymn in my throat, I could survive one evening with my heart burning like a coal. I thought of the shoes I bought him for 8th grade graduation, that hard summer we were counting pennies in a jar. I thought of his little hand in mine that rainy day his father was lowered into the ground, how he squeezed and said, "Mama, it's just me and you." I thought of all I had given, and then I looked at that silver room where I had nothing but a chair by the kitchen. A woman passed, leaned to her friend, and whispered like people do when they mean to be heard anyway. "Is that his mother?" Her friend shrugged and kept walking. Another woman glanced down at me and smiled the way you smile at a child in a hallway, sweet and quick and gone. They cut the cake.
They toasted.
I sat and felt the music roll by like trains at night. When it was time to send them off with ribbons and bells, I stood because standing is what you do when you don't know what else to do. The driver asked if I wanted to wait to say goodbye. I shook my head. I had already been told goodbye without words. On the ride home, the city lights blurred. I don't know if it was my eyes or the glass or God being kind enough to turn the whole evening soft. The driver was gentle and quiet. When I opened my front door, my house breathed out the way an old house does, slow and familiar. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of my bed in my dress. I kept my hat on.
Don't ask me why.
Maybe I was afraid if I took it off, the whole day would fall apart and pour onto the floor. I reached into my purse and touched the envelope. I had kept it with me like a secret. It was the receipt from the bridal boutique, folded neat. The numbers were heavy. I had paid them bit by bit, quiet as a prayer. I had handed over my wedding ring to cover the last part. I told myself I was sewing into love. I told myself that's what mamas do. I pressed the envelope to my chest and felt the weight of paper and promise. I closed my eyes and asked the Lord the simplest question in the world, and the hardest. Did I do wrong? Some nights the answer comes like thunder. That night, it came like stillness. I thought stillness meant nothing at all, but I learned later that stillness is what God uses when He is building a road you can't see yet. 3 days later, the truth came walking right at my steps and knocked on my door. My name is May Carter. I am 67 years old, and I have a way of setting the table even when no one is coming. I grew up in a small house with a tin roof and a porch that leaned toward the road, like it wanted to hear the gossip. My mama taught me 2 things so deep I can't tell where they end: how to make a meal from nearly nothing, and how to believe that God sees everything. I married young. We were poor then and poor after, but we were together. My husband, Louis, had a laugh that could fill a room and a cough that could empty it. He worked at the plant, came home with grease on his knuckles, and a kiss on my cheek. We had one child, a little boy who came into the world on a storm afternoon. The nurse pressed him to my chest and I said, Daniel. It was the first name that filled my mouth like bread. Louis died when Daniel was 8. If someone asks me how, I say, he worked hard and it took him. That is true enough and kind enough, and sometimes that is all a story needs to be, true and kind. We buried him under a sky that couldn't decide whether to rain or bless. My boy squeezed my fingers hard, and I squeezed back harder. On the ride home, I took the long way past the river so Daniel could see something that kept moving. The years after were thin but honest. I took a job at the diner and picked up a night at the motel laundry. I learned every stain by sight and every shift by sound. I learned to fold sheets so sharp the corners would stand up and salute. Some evenings I would come home and sit on the porch and watch my boy do his homework at the kitchen table. He would look up and tell me facts like treasures, how many bones in the hand, how far the moon is, how a seed goes dark before it goes green. I nodded and said, Yes, Lord, to a child who was answering questions I hadn't learned to ask yet. We found a church that held us like an old quilt holds a chill away. I sang alto because that is where my voice lives. Daniel learned to usher. He stood tall with those white gloves on, guiding people past the center aisle like he was leading them into safety. He grew into a good man one habit at a time, returning what wasn't his, holding doors for the slow, taking his cap off at prayer. I taught him to iron a shirt. He taught me my phone. I taught him how to season a skillet. He taught me how to rest my feet on the ottoman without apologizing. When the time came for college, we sat at the table with a stack of forms that looked like a storm itself. Scholarships, loans, letters from counselors. I didn't want him to take on debt that would yoke his shoulders, but sometimes the path you're offered is the path you walk. I told him, Go on, son. I'll be fine. He kissed my cheek, and I stood on the porch waving until the car turned and the road took him. The house was quiet then. Quiet has a weight, if you don't know. It sits on the couch beside you. It climbs into bed if you let it. I cleaned a lot those first months. Polished the table that didn't need polishing. Ironed pillowcases like a hotel maid. Started baking pound cakes and taking them to folks who didn't need cake but needed somebody. That's how I kept from counting the hours. Daniel did well. He called on Sundays after evening service. He told me about professors and projects, about a boy from Detroit who became his friend, about a girl who smiled, then didn't, then did. I wrote his stories in a lined notebook like I was saving rain. When he finished, he came home for a season, then got a job in the city. He bought a suit that looked like it belonged to a man who had already earned it. He started sending me pictures of buildings made of glass and people made of hurry. I met Alana at a barbecue where the napkins were linen and the ribs were not. She was pretty in the way some women are trained to be. It lived in her posture and the tilt of her chin. She held her phone like it held a future only she understood. She shook my hand with fingers that didn't curl. Mrs. Carter, she said, I've heard so much about you. Then she turned back to her friends and continued a story that had nothing to do with me. I tried. I did. I asked about her work and her mother and whether she liked sweet tea, or just pretended to. She smiled thin and said, I'm keto for now. I brought a pie to her birthday. She thanked me by text. I invited her to church for the Women's Day program. She said she'd be there, then she wasn't. I told myself not to take it personal. Some folks live in a world where kindness is a costume, and they don't know what to do with people who wear it like skin. When Daniel told me they were engaged, I set my hands on the table to keep them from flying up and scattering joy all over the room. He was happy, and I loved his happiness. He said, Mama, it's going to be beautiful. I said, Yes, Lord. I meant it. The planning came fast. Venues and menus and colors I had never heard of turned into decisions with price tags. I asked where I could help. Alana said the polite things that sound like doors but are really walls. We've got it. Don't you worry. You'll be a guest. Somehow that last one felt like a sentence, not a kindness. I watched my boy learn a new language, tastefully muted, elevated simplicity, curated, words that said less and cost more. He started calling on Tuesdays instead of Sundays. He started returning my missed calls with a text, "Busy now, mama." He stopped asking me to pray over his food when he visited and started ordering in from places with sauces that made you whisper whether you liked them or not. I told myself it was a season. New love is a house with doors that people forget to open. I stood on the porch of it, willing and waiting. I told myself when the day came, I would cry the good tears and hold my child's face in my hands and tell him, "You are worth every mile, son." That was the picture I kept in my chest. And then the dress. Lord help me, the dress. It cost more than my first car. Alana sent a link to Daniel, and Daniel sent it to me like a question with a bow. "We're still deciding, Mama, but isn't it amazing?" I looked at the number and swallowed it. I texted back a heart, because sometimes love is mute on purpose. He called later that night, voice smaller than usual. "We're coming up short for the final payment." I asked him how short. He told me. I told him I would see what I could do. I took my wedding ring out of my top drawer. It was the only gold I had that meant something heavy. I held it in my palm and watched how it captured light. I remembered Louis's hands sliding it onto mine in a church that smelled like lilies and dust. I tucked the ring into my purse and rode the bus to the boutique.
The door chimed.
The girls in black dresses looked me up and down like I had taken a wrong turn. I told them I was there for Alana Pierce's dress. One girl clicked on a screen, smiled like a teacher who had found a mistake, then fixed it. I handed over my ring, and I watched them weigh it into credit. On the way home, my hand felt naked. I curled my fingers into my palm to keep from reaching for what wasn't there. I told myself it was a seed. I told myself a harvest comes if you trust God longer than you trust the pain. When the day finally came, I pressed my dress, shined my shoes, and pinned on the brooch that belonged to my mother. I took a deep breath and asked the Lord for grace big enough to hold everybody in it. I walked into that sparkling hall, expecting a place. And I was told there wasn't one. I made it home that night with dignity barely stitched together, a seam about to split. I put the receipt back in its envelope and set it by my Bible. I went to sleep with my hands flat on my stomach, like I was guarding something. 3 days later, there was a knock at my door. It was the boutique girl. Not the one who weighed my ring. Another one, younger, eyes still soft around the edges. She had a small box in her hands and a paper bag over her arm. "Mrs. Carter?" she asked. "I'm so sorry to bother you. We had a mix-up with addresses. We should have sent this to the bride, but the system printed your name because..." She looked down at her clipboard. "Because you're listed as the guarantor." I stood there in my doorway with my robe tied tight. "Come on in, baby," I said, because I was raised to offer people a seat before I offered them a question. She stepped into my living room and sat on the edge of the couch like she didn't want to dent it. She placed the box on my coffee table like it might sing. She lifted the lid. It was the veil, white like fresh linen in morning light, beaded so fine it looked like dew. Tucked on top was a small envelope from the boutique owner, a handwritten note with a flourish. "Thank you for your patronage, Ms. May. Your generosity made a beautiful day possible." The girl looked up, eyes wide. "You didn't receive this, did you?" I shook my head. I touched the card with 2 fingers like it might break. "No, I did not." She pressed her lips together. "They told us not to contact you, that there was tension." She seemed ashamed of the word. But this and the address. I didn't feel right ignoring it. My grandma always says, do the right thing even if it's the quiet thing. I smiled a little. Your grandma is a woman of sense. She set a folded paper on the table, a final invoice with every payment listed. There were 3 small payments from Daniel's account. There was one big final payment, credited under my name with a description, ring collateral and cash. There was a thank you line keyed in by hand. "Blessings on your family." I made tea, because brewing is what I do when words are scarce. We sat for a moment with steam between us like a curtain. I asked her, "When you say they told you not to contact me, who do you mean?" "The bride's mother," she said, quick like a child who wants to be truthful before she remembers grown-up rules. "And the planner. They said there was no need to reach out, that it would cause confusion." I thanked the girl, handed her a slice of pound cake wrapped in wax paper, and walked her to the door. She hugged me. Not a quick church hug, a real one, soft and honest. When she was gone, I locked the door and stood in my small quiet house with a veil on my table and a note calling me generous and a memory of a metal chair by a kitchen door. I called my son. It went to voicemail. I called again and left a message. "Daniel, it's Mama. Come by this evening." No explanation because I had learned that too many words chase a man away faster than silence does. He came around 9, all city on him, jacket folded over his arm, phone lit up in his hand, the tired pride of a young husband tugging at his mouth. He kissed my cheek, and for a second I saw my boy who used to run home with a library book held high like a trophy. I pointed to the table. He saw the veil. He set his phone face down. "Mama? I need you to look," I said. He read the note. He read the invoice. He stared at my coffee table like it had told him a story that couldn't be true. He lifted his eyes to mine and searched my face for something he could call a mistake. "You did this?" he asked, but his voice said, "Tell me it isn't so." "Yes," I said. "I did." "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, angry riding under his words like a current. "Because you were already carrying too much," I said. "Because you asked for help like a man who didn't want to, and I answered like a mother who always will." He swallowed. Alana said her mother covered the rest. She told a planner. She told people. He sat down hard like his legs had forgotten their work. "She said you didn't offer." I felt something inside me flinch. Not at the lie I had been lied to before, but at the thought of my son choosing it over me without asking. He put his elbows on his knees and rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. "Mama, at the reception, she said there wasn't a seat for you." "She did," I said. I thought he stopped himself. He was about to say what men say when their loyalty is mixed and they don't want to spill it on the floor. He was about to say he thought I had made trouble, or refused something, or said a word that didn't need saying. He was about to say he believed the story that made his new life easier. "Son," I said, gentle like I was laying a warm cloth on a fever. "I sat where they told me, and I kept quiet, so you could have your joy." He broke then. Not with tears, not yet. With the kind of breath a man lets go when he has been holding one too long. He picked up the veil and set it down again like a fragile truth he didn't yet know how to carry. "Where's your ring?" he asked, noticing what only a child notices about his mother. "In a dress," I said. "Alana wore it when she walked down the aisle, not knowing it had me in it." He closed his eyes. "I need to talk to her." "I know," I said. "But before you do, I want you to hear something." I handed him my Bible and told him to read out loud from the page I had marked, a small verse that says love rejoices with the truth. His voice shook on the word rejoices. When he finished, he sat very still. "I'll make this right," he said. "Make it true," I answered. "Right will follow." He left in a hurry. I stood at the window and watched my boy walk down my steps the way he used to, 2 at a time, when he was late for school. Some habits don't mean a thing until they do again. The next day, nothing happened on the surface and everything happened underneath. I cleaned my kitchen because kitchens need it. I refolded the towels. I took a nap I didn't plan. By evening, my phone chimed with a message from the pastor's wife. "May, can you come by church tomorrow at 5? We need to talk." My stomach dropped like I had missed a stair. I walked into the pastor's office at 5 on the Daniel was there. Alana was there. Her mother, Lorraine, was there, sitting like a queen whose crown had slipped and she didn't yet know it. Pastor and his wife sat across from us with their faces set to peace. Pastor opened in prayer, because that's what he does when fire is near. Then he looked at me, then at Alana. "We're here to clear things," he said. "Truth is the only broom that sweeps clean." Alana shifted. "I don't understand why we're dragging the church into family matters," she said, Pretty voice pulled tight. Pastor's wife, who works part-time at the boutique, folded her hands. Because sometimes family matters grow in the dark, she said, and this is a house with light. Daniel turned to his wife. Alana, Mama paid for your dress. She gave her ring. Why did you tell me your mother covered it? Lorraine lifted her chin. Because it was handled, that's all you needed to know. She smiled at Pastor like he might agree that men don't need all the details. And who cares who paid, as long as it was beautiful. Pastor's wife reached into her folder like a schoolteacher with papers graded in red. She laid down copies of the invoice, the note, the credit receipt. Lorraine's name was nowhere. Mine was everywhere. The room went quiet in that special church way where even the walls seemed to listen. Alana's face didn't change for a long second. Then she laughed, quick and sharp. So what? She said. She paid for the dress. That doesn't buy a seat at my wedding. Boundaries are healthy. I saw my son flinch, like the word boundaries had turned into a blade. He put his hands flat on his knees and looked at his wife, as if he had never looked at her before. You told the planner not to seat my mother, he said. You said there was family tension. His voice didn't rise, but it deepened like a river in rain. She crossed her legs and leaned back. Your mother is intense, she said. She cries at everything. She offers advice when no one asks. She embarrasses me. I sat very still. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to pull old stories into the room and line them up like witnesses. Instead, I lifted my eyes to the ceiling tiles and whispered a word to the God who has never needed a microphone to hear me. Pastor's wife spoke, voice soft but firm. Sweetheart, she said to Alana, you accepted a gift you would have been proud to claim if it had come in a different box. You accepted love and returned shame. That kind of debt comes due. Alana looked at Daniel. Are you going to let them talk to me like this? He took a breath that sounded like a door opening. No, he said. I'm going to talk to you like this. You hurt my mother. You lied to me. You asked me to choose your comfort over her dignity, and I did. He turned to me, eyes bright. Mama, I'm sorry. I nodded. It was all I could do. If I had opened my mouth, grief might have poured out so fast it would drown us all. Lorraine stood. We don't need this, she said to her daughter. Let's go. You have me. You don't need them. Her voice trembled then, a quiver showing at the edge where pride gets tired. Pastor said, before you go, I'd like you to hear a word about honoring. He read a verse about mothers. He closed the book with a soft thump, and in that small sound, something broke in the room that needed breaking. Alana looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, but not in the way that heals. You should have stayed in your lane, she said. You bought a dress, not a seat. Daniel stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. Enough, he said. Enough. He took my hand, right there in the pastor's office, and squeezed it the way he had at his father's grave. He didn't look at his wife or her mother or the pastor or anyone. He looked at me. I let you be humiliated, he said. I believe the story that made my life easier. I am ashamed. I put my hand on his cheek. Shame won't fix a thing, I said. Truth might. He nodded. Then here is truth, he said to the room. We're going to make this right. Lorraine scoffed.
How?
A public apology? A refund? Pastor's wife spoke again. Right starts with repent, then repair, then repeat the right thing until it's who you are. She smiled a little, like a woman who knows the recipe for bread and for peace. Alana didn't apologize that day. She stood and left with her mother, who gathered her purse like a shield. Daniel and I sat a while longer, quiet in the way people are when the storm has passed overhead, but the thunder is still walking away. That week, Daniel came by every evening. Sometimes he talked, sometimes he sat. He brought collard greens from my favorite spot and left them on the counter like offerings. He fixed the wobbly leg on my kitchen table. He put my picture in a better frame. He slept one night in his old room with the window cracked and the crickets busy, and I listened to his breathing like an old song. Alana called him and texted him and sent him pictures of their couch with the throw pillows arranged like an argument. He answered less and less. One afternoon, She came to my porch, heels digging little moons into my steps. She stood with her arms crossed. "You're turning him against me," she said. "No," I said. "Truth is." She looked past me into my living room the way a person does when they're trying to see what they are not brave enough to step into. "If you want your son," she said, "you're going to have to accept that I come first." "I don't mind being second," I said. "But I won't be last." She laughed without humor. "You church women," she said, "always speaking in puzzles." I looked at her face, lovely and tired, and too proud to be young. "Baby," I said, "a puzzle is what you get when you break a picture and still want it to be whole." She didn't answer. She left in a swirl of perfume and impatience. 2 Sundays later, Daniel asked to speak at the end of service. He stood at the pulpit where he used to stand as a boy with his usher gloves on, and he told the church the truth. He said his mother had given what she had. He said he had failed to honor me. He said he had chosen comfort over courage, and he was sorry. Then he turned toward me in the pew and said, "Mama, will you forgive me?" I stood, knees soft with age and mercy, and said, "Yes." The church rose up around us with those sounds only a black church knows how to make. Tears and praise tangled, hands clapping in rhythm that doesn't need a drum. Pastor came down and wrapped us in a hug so big it could have been a tent in the wilderness. Alana wasn't there, but word never needed pews to travel. By evening, the truth had run its full lap through the people who mattered and the people who didn't, and the people who wanted to be both. That night, my doorbell rang. It was Alana, eyes rimmed red, dressed too tight, pride loosened by what life had finally said back to her. She held out the veil box like it weighed 100 pounds.
"Take it," she said.
"I don't want it." "It's yours," I said. "It was always meant to be yours." She looked surprised, like she had expected me to snatch it back, like a mother reclaiming a toy. "Why?" she asked. "Because gifts don't stop being gifts because people stop being grateful," I said. "If they did, none of us would have breath." She swallowed, and for a second I saw a little girl inside the woman, the kind who didn't learn gentleness because it wasn't handed down. "My mother." She started, then stopped. "I know," I said. I didn't know the details, but I knew the shape. Some of us are taught the whole time we are growing up that love is a ladder and we'd better be standing on someone. It's hard to step off and harder to stop climbing. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "But not to fight. If you're here to fight, come back another day." She laughed a little through her nose. "No," she said. "I'm too tired for that." We sat at my table. I poured her tea. She held the mug with both hands, and I noticed for the first time her nails were plain. She told me about a mother who loved loud and wild, who taught her that money was applause and pity was a disease. She told me she had been afraid from the first day she met my son that I would be the kind of woman you can't outshine. "And look at me," she said, small smile. I was right. "I am not a light you have to compete with," I said. "I am a window. You can stand in front of me and shine through." She cried then, quiet tears that didn't ask for a handkerchief. "I was wrong," she said. "I wanted the day to be perfect. I wanted everything curated. You were too real." "Real is what holds when curated breaks," I said. "I forgive you." She blinked. "Just like that?" "Forgiveness is a door I keep unlocked," I said. "But stepping through it takes work." I tapped the veil box. "You can start by telling the truth to the people you lied to." She nodded, eager like a child promising to be good. "I will." She did halfway. She called the planner and the pastor's wife. She told some friends. She posted something nice about me on her page with a picture of me smiling that made me look kindly and not tired. She never said the part about the seat. Maybe that was too deep a cut for public words. Maybe it was mine to carry and mine to set down. Daniel came by later and sat on my steps with his head in his hands. "I want to fix my house, Mama," he said. "But I don't know if the foundation is cracked or just the paint." "Time will tell," I said. "Truth will, too." He moved home for a while. He slept in his old bed. He mowed my lawn with lines so straight they looked like marching. He went to counseling with Pastor. He took long walks without his phone. He spoke to Alana in short, honest sentences that didn't try to sell anything. In that season, the betrayal felt like weather. It soaked us, but it didn't drown us. We kept breathing. We kept going to church. We kept eating supper at the table. We learned to sit with silence without letting it bully us. And then one afternoon a new letter came, one that would tip what was left of the balance and send us all into the next thing. It was from the bank. A simple envelope with my name in a little window, like a polite knock. Inside was a statement for a line of credit I did not have. I put on my glasses and read slow. It listed charges from the wedding week, florist, lighting company, vendor with a name that sounded like clouds, and the planner's final fee. The account holder was Daniel Carter. The guarantor was listed as May Carter. I sat down hard and read again. There was plain and printed. My name tied to debt I had never seen, like someone had borrowed my good name like a code and then dragged it through mud. At the bottom, there was a copy of a digital signature I did not sign. There was an address I did not live at. I called the number on the letter. A woman with a careful voice told me the guarantor had been set up through a digital authorization from an email address I recognized as Daniel's. I thanked her and hung up and put my hands flat on the table to feel wood and steadiness. Daniel came from work as soon as I told him. He stared at the paper with a face that looked somehow older and younger at once. "Mama, I didn't," he shook his head. "I would never." "I know," I said. I did know. Breath by breath, I was learning to trust his voice over the echoes of fear. We called the bank together. We filed the dispute. Then Daniel called the planner. Her voice came out sweet enough to pour on pancakes. "Oh, that," she said. "There must have been a misunderstanding. We were under the impression Mrs. Carter had agreed to guarantee the line. Alana said she would handle it." He hung up and called his wife. She didn't pick up. He texted. He paced my kitchen like a man waiting on a baby that should have been born yesterday. When she finally walked in, she set her purse down like she was placing a bomb. "What is this?" he asked, holding up the paper. She glanced, shrugged. "It was a formality," she said. "Your mother said she wanted to help." I stood. My chair scraped the floor, like truth sometimes does. "I did help," I said. "I gave you something I could never get back. My ring. My pride. My quiet." I lifted the paper. "I did not give you my name for debt." She rolled her eyes. "Mrs. Carter, please. It's just paperwork." "It's character," I said. "Paper shows it." Something shifted in Daniel then. I saw it happen like a shadow moving off his face. He had been merciful, without muscle. Now he put strength behind it. "You forged my mother's authorization," he said. Not loud. Not cruel. Just true. "I used your login," she said. "You gave it to me." "For groceries," he said. "For light bills. Not for lies." She crossed her arms, then let them drop. Even her shoulders seemed tired of her. "We needed it," she said, voice small. "Your friends were watching. My mother told me people would talk if the wedding wasn't enough." "People did talk," I said. "They talked about a bride who looked pretty and a mama who sat in the dark." She flinched. I said I was sorry for that. "I came here. I told the truth, some of it." "Truth can't be portioned like cake," I said. "You don't get to slice it where the frosting is and leave the rest." She started to cry, but it was the kind that wants to be a soap, not a bath. No cleansing in it. Just suds. Daniel didn't rush to hand her a tissue. He let the moment stand. "We will unwind the guarantor," he said. "We will call the bank. We will meet with Pastor again. And, Alana, we will have to decide what our house is going to be built on because right now it is sand." She nodded then, small and exact, like a child agreeing to a list of chores she had no intention of doing. She left with her purse heavy on her arm and the air light behind her. Pastor met with us again. This time, he let us sit in silence for a long minute before he spoke. "Sin is just missing the mark," he said. "But if you like missing, it becomes a sport." Alana stared at the rug. "I didn't mean." "You meant to be admired," Pastor said, gentle and unblinking. "You meant to be safe from embarrassment. You meant to be in control. None of that is love. She looked up. You're taking her side, she said, pointing at me like I was the problem and not the mirror. I'm taking God's side, he said. And he always sits where the truth is. The next days were a long, slow storm. The bank removed my name. The planner sent a stiff apology that had more words than remorse. Lorraine called me, tried to turn it into a misunderstanding between women. I listened, then said, Lorraine, my life is too far along for confusion. I know what happened, and so do you. She huffed and hung up. Alana came back, then didn't. She slept at her mother's for a while. Daniel kept coming home to my house and not going to theirs. He moved his books. He moved his shirts. He left the liquor on the bar cart behind, and I said a quiet amen about that. On a Wednesday night, after prayer meeting, Pastor's wife took my hand in the fellowship hall and squeezed. Sometimes revelation doesn't come with lightning, she said. Sometimes it's a light coming on in one room at a time. What do I do with what I see? I asked. You bless what's true, and you leave what's broken, she said. Both are holy. 1 week later, Alana asked to meet me at the little diner where I used to work. She sat in the booth across from me and ran her finger over the laminated menu like it could scrub her past. I grew up hungry, she said, surprising me with a truth big enough to sit between us. Not for food, for respect. I know that hunger, I said. It eats and never gets full. My mother taught me to feed it with other people's pride. I nodded. Mine taught me to starve it with gratitude. She swallowed. I don't know how to be new, she said. You don't have to, I said. You have to be honest. Honesty is a seed. New grows from it. She told me then that she had told Daniel everything. She told me she was moving out for a while, not as a threat, but as a mercy. I need to see who I am when I'm not pretending, she said. I paid for our coffee and left the tip big, because that's what women like me do when we remember the nights our feet hurt and our names were ma'am. In the parking lot, I hugged her. She didn't hug me back right away. Then she did. I felt it when something in her softened, not all the way, but enough to begin. I went home to my quiet house and sat on the porch. The sky was pink and wide like a blessing you don't have to chase. Daniel came and sat beside me. We watched the street like it might do a trick, but it was a street and stayed itself. Mama, he said finally, I am learning that love is not a performance. No, I said. Love is practice. He put his head on my shoulder like he had when he was little and summer was long. I want a house where truth is the first furniture we move in. Then buy less couch, I said, and we both laughed, the kind of laughter that comes after a storm when you can hear your own voice again. That was the discovery, really. Not the veil or the bank letter or the planner's apology. It was this. I learned where I end and where my child begins, and that the line between us is not a fence but a garden row. I sow in mine. He sows in his. We share shade. We don't steal fruit. Time passed like it does, slow when you watch it, fast when you don't. Daniel and Alana took their separate corners of the ring and put down their gloves. He kept coming to church. She started going to counseling with a woman who tells the truth with a voice like honey and sand. Lorraine stayed loud. Some mothers don't know how to be small enough to let their daughters grow. One Sunday, months later, Alana stood at testimony time. She looked like herself for the first time, no armor. She said, I owe a debt I can't repay. She looked at me. But I can live in a way that honors it. She didn't tell the whole world about the seat or the bank, but she told enough. She said her mother-in-law had given when giving cost her. She said she had taken comfort over truth and pride over love, and that she was sorry. She didn't dress it with excuses. She didn't borrow her mother's voice. She stood in her own and let it tremble. The church did what churches do when the Spirit walks down the aisle, in plain clothes. We breathed out together. A few women clapped once, not for applause, but like a seal on a document. Pastor nodded slow. I sat very still and felt an old ache loosen its grip. After service, Alana came to me. She didn't reach for a hug. She reached for my hands. She held them like a person holds something they have been careless with and want to learn to protect. She said, "Thank you for not making my shame your sport." I said, "Thank you for letting truth hire you." She looked over my shoulder, and I saw Lorraine standing by the door, lips pressed, eyes busy, calculating how to recast the scene into a story where she was the author. I didn't mind. The Lord can write between any lines. Days steadied. Daniel moved back into his place, but not into the same life. He and Alana started from the ground. Budget meetings at my kitchen table. Prayers that didn't try to impress God. They learned how to be quiet without punishing each other. They learned how to speak without advertising themselves. Some evenings they came by together and ate stew and cornbread and washed the dishes like two people who had finally figured out that suds are their own kind of therapy. My ring did not come back. I thought, for a while, that closure meant redemption of every item. Then one Saturday afternoon Daniel knocked, not with a box, but with a paper and a pen. He pulled out a folded note and laid it on my table. On it was a list of repayments to different people, me at the top. Half of it was already crossed out. "We're paying as we go," he said. "In money where we can. In service where we must. In humility everywhere." There was a place at the bottom for my signature. Not to guarantee anything. To release bitterness. He said, "Sign it when you're ready." I left it on the sideboard for a week. Every time I passed, I touched it with 2 fingers like a pulse. On the 8th day, I signed. Not because every hurt was soothed, but because the Lord asked me, clear and gentle, "May, do you trust me to keep accounts?" I said yes and put the pen down. The planner sent a check to the church benevolence fund. It wasn't a full fee, but it was the right direction. The boutique girl, my little stranger turned messenger, stopped by with her grandmother. We drank tea on my porch. Her grandmother smiled at me and said, "You built a bridge with your spine, child." I laughed and said, "I just try not to fall off the edge." Lorraine kept her distance. Pride is an allergy to repentance. It makes your eyes water and your throat tight, and still you convince yourself it's the flower's fault. Once, at the market, she saw me buy the greens and turned down the bread aisle like she was hunting a sale on denial. I let her go. Not every woman is my assignment. Some are just my prayer list. Alana got a job at a community art center, teaching little girls how to see themselves as more than mirror and approval. She came by one evening with paint under her fingernails and said, smiling, "I've been washing my hands all day, and I can't get it off." I told her, "Some colors are supposed to stay. Let them." Daniel joined the men's group on Tuesdays, the one where they tell the truth and build things. They repaired a widow's porch until it held. They fixed a brother's car until it purred. They learned that repentance also swings a hammer. One night, near Advent, Daniel asked if he could take me to dinner. He wore a simple jacket, the kind that minds its business. We sat by the window of a small place with soft light and honest prices. He reached across the table, palms up. "Mama," he said, "I can't give you back that night, but I can give you this one." We talked about plain things, weather, work, the couple at the next table trying to decide if they were brave enough to marry. When the check came, he paid without flourish and without fear, 2 currencies I am learning to recognize. As we stood to leave, he cleared his throat.
"There's one more thing," he said.
He pulled a small pouch from his pocket and set it in my hand. Not a ring. A tiny gold charm in the shape of a window. On the back, engraved, "Keep the light, Mama." I cried a little. Not the kind that demands attention. The kind that waters old roots. He dried my cheeks with his thumbs and grinned like a boy who had learned that manhood is not a mask but a stewarding. At Christmas, we held a small supper at my house. We set one extra place at the table, like we do every year to remind ourselves there is always room for the unexpected guest, angel or neighbor, either will do. Alana came with a pan of sweet potatoes that tasted like she had finally met the soul of cinnamon. She handed me a folded note. On it, in her tidy hand, she had written what the internet refused to hold. I did wrong.
Elite.
I asked the man you raised to dishonor you.
You forgave me.
I am learning to be the kind of woman who could have deserved it. I put the note in my Bible, right under the verse we had read together in Pastor's office. Later, when everyone had gone, I ran my fingers over the imprint of the ink and thanked the Lord for letting paper preach to me in the middle of the night. Sometimes people ask me if we had a second wedding, a do-over with my name printed neat on a card and a seat draped in ribbon and my picture in the center, like a saint.
No.
We didn't need to make a spectacle of repair. We needed to make a life. So we did. One supper at a time. One apology at a time. One truthful bill paid with cash and kindness, both stamped with the date. Did the world notice? Some parts did. A cousin called to say she heard about what happened, and she hopes I learn my lesson about knowing my place. I smiled into the receiver and said, I have. It's called worthy. A neighbor told me she admired my restraint and then asked for the story again, but longer, so she could pass it on properly. I told her it's the kind of tale that shrinks when it's told for entertainment and grows when it's told for healing. Then I invited her in for pound cake and made her wash her hands and her mouth with the same water, truth. And what of me? I started walking at dawn, the hour where the world sits up in bed and remembers it's alive. I stopped setting the table when no one was coming. Not because I lost hope, but because I learned how to love myself with a plate just the same.
이상 엘초에겐.
I joined the quilting circle and stitched my scrap into a pattern called Mercy's Gate. The women laughed when I told them the name. Then they grew quiet, each of us thinking of a gate we had walked through that we did not deserve. One afternoon in spring, the boutique girl sent me a picture. It was of a bride I didn't know, standing in a simple white dress that didn't cost anybody's dignity. The veil fell soft as a sigh. The caption said, paid in full. I stood at my sink, smiling into the sunlight, and I blessed that stranger with a blessing that had finally learned its proper place, open-handed. People love to say everything happens for a reason. I don't know about all that, but I do know God can give a reason to anything that happens. He took a metal chair by a kitchen door and turned it into a seat at my own table where peace sits now regular as family. He took a wedding dress that cost too much and stitched humility into its hem. He took a son's blind spot and taught it to read. If you ask me for the lesson, here it is as straight as I can say it. Forgiveness is not a bargain you strike with the person who hurt you. It's a covenant you renew with the God who kept you. Boundaries are not punishment. They're the fences that keep your garden from being trampled by people who don't yet know the difference between flowers and feet. Honor does not mean silence. It means telling the truth with a steady tone and a clean face. And this, the part one had to learn slow. Sometimes losing them is how God saves you. Sometimes the door that slams is the one that keeps the wolves out. Sometimes the seat that isn't offered makes you go home and build a table where you will never again have to ask permission to be fed. If you are listening to me and your hurt has your name on it like a scar, hear me gentle and hear me clear. You are not an extra in your own story. You are not a burden to be managed. You are a woman or a man who lived, who gave, who learned to stand up at the altar of your own dignity and say, I do, to the person God made you to be. I still keep the veil box on a shelf, not as a trophy, as a reminder that even the prettiest fabric will unravel if pride pulls on it. When I dust it, I whisper a small prayer for every mother who has ever been told to wait outside. May the Lord open the door or teach her how to build another, but never let her forget she is worthy to walk through. And when the room gets quiet at night and memory comes like a tide, I lay my hand on my chest and say the benediction I've earned. The pain did not kill me. The truth raised me. The love of God held me when human love ran out of breath. If you have ever been hurt by your own family, remember, God still sees your tears. Besties, if this story touched you, go on and tap subscribe and ring that bell. Leave me a line in the comments. Tell me where it hurt and where God helped. Share this with one person who needs hope tonight.